I think a few things need to be established and maybe re-established regarding the Integrity Chamber. The Dutch government and the St. Martin government do not have an issue about an integrity chamber. This integrity chamber matter goes back at least to 2015. You would recall that there was this threat of Article 51, and quickly the government of St. Martin sent a representative to The Hague in the person of Minister at the time, Minister Dennis Richardson, and together with the Dutch government, they arrived at an agreement for an integrity chamber. 2017, again, there was talk about an Article 51 application. And again, the government of St. Martin took off to The Hague and reached an agreement about the integrity chamber. The integrity chamber was to be established if St. Martin was to do it, like we were in 2015 and again in 2017, to establish the integrity chamber by means of a national ordinance. That means a law passed by the Parliament of St. Martin. You would recall that back in 2015, for example, when the protocol was signed between the Dutch government and the St. Martin government, I, for one, was one who was in favor of the integrity chamber. I was not supporting the government at the time, but I believed at that time strongly that if the integrity chamber was to come, better have it be by an ordinance of St. Martin that the Parliament of St. Martin makes and passes. That was my position at the time, and the integrity chamber law, a law of St. Martin, was passed. We know what happened with that particular law. It was rejected by the Constitutional Court on the basis of the advice, on the basis of the case that the Ombudsman presented. So in the agreement of July 2017, the government of St. Martin agreed to an integrity chamber by national ordinance. It got so far on St. Martin that such an ordinance was drafted. There was no disagreement about that. What was the disagreement was when the Dutch government, viewing that draft national ordinance, said, and I paraphrase, "So far, so good. However, we want you to address this matter, and this matter." Three specific issues the Dutch government wanted either put into the draft national ordinance or changed in the draft national ordinance. Then came September 6th, Hurricane Irma. And even then, the Dutch government's position was, we are going to, again I'm paraphrasing, we are going to finish this story of the integrity chamber. And in fact, we are now going to make it a condition for St. Martin to receive aid. Now, whether that was one way of getting St. Martin to finish its story on the integrity chamber or not, that was put forward. I expressed my, not concern, but I expressed my displeasure with the fact that the Dutch government had tied these two things together, but I also stated that as far as I and the DP are concerned, that if that is the only thing standing in the way of St. Martin receiving that much needed aid, I was willing to lend my cooperation, and as a chairperson of Parliament, even bring the matter to Parliament to get the integrity chamber passed so that we could have crossed that hurdle and then really start to look at the aid that was destined for St. Martin. What I realized during this time of discussions about the integrity chamber was the fact that the proposal of the St. Martin government was to change the constitution of St. Martin to make the integrity chamber a high council of state. Making an institution a high council of state can only take place by our constitution. However, there are a couple of issues that arise when you make any change to the Constitution, including creating a new High Council of State, such as the Integrity Chamber. One, in order to make it happen, there is a particular procedure. You need 2/3 of the members of Parliament to agree with the change to our Constitution. That is to start with. During the discussions, or during a discussion, I was also alerted to the fact that if the Integrity Chamber is made a High Council of State, that would mean that the right of every citizen to appeal a decision by a public entity, that would not apply in the case you have a High Council of State. So for example, every citizen is entitled to appeal any decision by government in the court. You are entitled to do that. You do not agree with a decision, you appeal it. If you are dealing with a High Council of State, that does not apply. You can't use the so-called LAR, as we call it, appeal to address an issue that you believe the government or the public entity did not address adequately, in your opinion. So we still have to deal with the matter, one, that integrity law is being proposed to change the Constitution of St. Martin, to get it there, and the fact that then you would have the situation that I just mentioned regarding the appeal possibility. But those are more technicalities. What happened? The government, the Prime Minister, and other members of government were very, very clear on their position with respect to the conditions that the Dutch government put forward. They were not going to agree with the conditions, not because they were against the Integrity Chamber, but because they felt that the Dutch government had nothing to say about changes that the Dutch government wanted. It was clear. I became, like many persons on St. Martin, very concerned about that standpoint of the St. Martin government, because what was happening, the door was closing. The 31st of October was approaching. And again, I mentioned, while there were talks about a plan B and alternative plans and you name it, nothing was being shown to the people of St. Martin. On the 24th of October, after several continuations of a meeting, we get a motion that was passed unanimously in Parliament regarding the matter of assistance, regarding the matter of the relationship with the Dutch government, etc., etc. Nothing happened. On the 26th of October, I specifically convened, as chairperson of Parliament, a meeting to deal with, one, the Integrity Chamber, two, the border control issue. What happened that particular day in the meeting? Primarily, the coalition partners, in fact, I think it was only coalition partners, walked out of that meeting, leaving me no alternative but to adjourn the meeting, because I ended up without a quorum in the meeting. That means that the matter of the Integrity Chamber and border control, those two matters could not be addressed in Parliament. On the 27th, now Friday last, on the basis of a request by the coalition to discuss aid in general, which again I saw as an opportunity for the Parliament to take a position on, and it is in that meeting that I felt it very necessary, taking everything into consideration, the tension, the nervousness, the lack of information, the lack of communication, to make my position even clearer in that meeting. And that's the meeting that is sometimes referred to as when the bombshell was dropped. But fact is that I believe that St. Martin's Parliament needed to be able to take a clear position, and I wanted to make sure that it was understood that as far as the faction of the Democratic Party was concerned, our position remained what it was. And that was, if those conditions, which they were, in terms of the integrity chamber and border control, were standing in the way of St. Martin receiving that much needed aid in or to the tune of hundreds of millions of euros, that's what it is, then I said we are going to accept those conditions and we will deal with whatever needed to be dealt with after. This has nothing to do with should the Dutch government set up a control body or a control structure for their funds. Of course they should. And nobody can object against that. But this was now becoming a matter of, this is my position and this is your position. And there's no way that we can cross the bridge. I want to fast forward to now Monday. Now this is yesterday, the 30th of October. And then I am going to understand that the government has changed its position with respect to these conditions on the basis of the advice of the Council of Advice. For the people of St. Martin, who I am also addressing in this press briefing, I need to explain briefly. As I mentioned, the proposal of the government of St. Martin was to change the Constitution of St. Martin to establish another High Council of State, like we have the Ombudsman, the General Audit Chamber, and the Council of Advice, to create an integrity chamber. To change the Constitution of St. Martin, an ordinance needs to be passed. That needs to be passed with 2/3 majority of Parliament. In order for that to come to Parliament, the draft needed to be commented on by the Council of Advice. Then the government needs to react to the advice of the Council of Advice, and then all of that will come to Parliament. When, after the 27th, which was last Friday, I made my statement, I made it very clear, and then it was my intention to seek support for those members in Parliament and factions in Parliament who, like the Democratic Party, felt that in this particular instance, the interests of the people of St. Martin came first. It did not matter whether I liked or appreciated how the Dutch government went about imposing these conditions. It did not matter, for me at least, whether I thought that they were going a little too far in internal matters of St. Martin. But the fact remains that the government of St. Martin and the Dutch government on the 6th of July 2017 had arrived at an agreement for an integrity chamber. That, coupled with the fact that the interests of the people needed to prevail in this case, was for me the reasons to decide now this matter needs to get to the Parliament. And if we could have done something before the 31st, which was the deadline, then it needed to be done. Many people have stated in the past, well, you know, I think the Dutch government is bluffing. They say if they don't get the integrity chamber this time around, an Article 51 will come down. I did not believe that the Dutch government was bluffing. We said the same thing in 2015. We ended up running to The Hague to reach an agreement when we realized it was no bluff. The same thing happened in 2017. We said they were bluffing. When we realized that was not the case, we ran to The Hague and we signed off an agreement. You have to finish that story one way or another. Up until that meeting on Friday, no member of government, and surely not the Prime Minister, gave the slightest indication that he was having a change of heart. The advice of the Council of Advice is dated the 23rd of October. I am not sure when the government received it, but it being the urgent issue that it is, I want to believe that if they did not get it on the 23rd, they surely had that advice before the 27th, before the 26th even. And why? Why, if the Prime Minister received the advice from the Council of Advice that suggested that he changes his position, why did he not communicate that to his coalition partners, to the President of Parliament, to the people of St. Martin, to say, don't stress any longer. I have changed my position. I no longer object to the conditions put forward by the Dutch government. But no, when I decided enough is enough, as I stated, and I decided that I'm going to have to part ways with the coalition on this topic and seek an understanding, seek an agreement, agree to the conditions to release the funding. Up until that Friday, not a word was said, to me at least, and nor to the people of St. Martin. And so, yes, immediately following that meeting, I decided to collect, to look for, to bring together the support, to get enough support, so that before the 31st of October 2017, I would have been able to say to the Dutch government, a majority in Parliament is ready and willing to accept the conditions as you put forward, so that then you can meet your commitment and start the disbursement of the much needed funds to St. Martin. So I was looking for a coalition of the willing, if you wish to call it that. And by Sunday evening, I believe it was, we had an agreement by 8 members of Parliament, the 5 of the United People's Party, the 2 of the Democratic Party, and member Chanel Brownbill. Now you would ask yourself, why did I not say independent member Chanel Brownbill? Because MP Brownbill has not declared himself an independent. What MP Brownbill has indicated he will be doing is seeking alignment with the faction of the Democratic Party in the Parliament of St. Martin, which he can do. Factions can change, they can split, they can grow, and that is his intention. So you would see the documents that have been signed do not speak of an independent member of Parliament. I know that to the media, at least on the evening of Monday, October the 30th, you have received a declaration with a few points of where the 8 members who have given their commitment to deal with the conditions put forward so that the money to St. Martin can be released. And what the media did not receive yet, however, was that these 8 members have also written to the governor of St. Martin, the Parliament of St. Martin, the Council of Ministers of St. Martin, to declare the following. The undersigned 8 members of Parliament, Theodore Heiliger, Perry Heerlings, Franklin Myers, Tamara Leonard, Sidat Bijlani, Claret Connor, Chanel Brownbill, and Sarah Wescot Williams hereby declare their willingness to join together and form a new government for St. Martin with the objective of breaking the impasse on the Dutch aid on the basis of mutual trust and understanding. An economic recovery program will be the first order of business. And all the names mentioned have affixed their signature to that document. Following Sunday evening or Sunday's activities, an attempt was made to have a meeting starting with the leaders of the former coalition, so the red, white, and blue one. That did not work out. Attempts were made to have a coalition meeting. That did not work out. And then, as you know, I had a meeting with the governor on Monday as well. And following that and everything that happened, the declaration that I mentioned was signed off, as well as that other declaration giving an indication as to how the 8 members plan to address this matter.